So pretty much every anatomical poster hanging up in your local gym is, well, it's kind of lying to you.
Oh, absolutely. They completely are.
Right. I mean, think about those diagrams on the wall.
Hmm.
The ones that, highlight a glowing red bicep or a perfectly isolated hamstring.
Right, the ones that make the human body look like some sort of meat machine.
Exactly. Just a collection of, like, mechanical hinges and pulleys. Like, you want to bend your arms, you pull the bicep lever. You want to straighten it, you pull the tricep lever.
It's incredibly logical on paper.
Right. It makes total sense, but it's completely fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, it's a seductive lie because it's so easy to understand. But, that linear block-by-block model just completely misses the actual native language that our central nervous system uses to navigate the physical world.
And decoding that native language is exactly what we're doing today. So welcome to our deep dive. We're getting into an absolutely paradigm-shifting document today, which is called Les chaînes de Cabot, l'alphabet universel du mouvement, or the chains of Cabot, the universal alphabet of movement.
It's such a fascinating piece of work.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the hidden grammar of human biomechanics. We are going to see how your biology is actually built on, like, three-dimensional spirals, not straight lines.
Which is a huge shift in how we think about moving.
Massive.
Yeah.
And we'll also look at how teaching this ancient biological syntax to artificial intelligence platforms, specifically like Kinexa and the work of Dr. Christophe Delong, is just totally upending everything from physical therapy to elite sports coaching.
Yeah, it really is a massive paradigm shift in how we quantify human action. But to understand how advanced AI is finally learning to see movement properly, we actually have to look way back to the 1940s.
Right, because this isn't exactly a brand new idea, is it?
No, not at all. The foundation for all this was laid between 1946 and 1952 by Herman Cabot, Maggie Knott, and Dorothy Voss.
Okay.
They were just observing clinical movement, and they realized something that challenged the entire medical establishment at the time. They realized the nervous system simply does not command isolated muscles.
So your brain doesn't have, like, a specific file folder just for your anterior deltoid.
Exactly. It just doesn't work that way.
Which means if you try to do a pure linear movement, like a perfectly straight bicep curl, you are actually forcing your body to do something that is neurologically artificial.
Precisely. We are just not built for straight lines. We are fundamentally built for spirals. So Cabot theorized that the brain commands global, multi-articular patterns that actually cross the anatomical planes of the body diagonally.
Diagonally.
Right. He proposed that all human movement basically operates on a minimal grammar made up of just 12 fundamental diagonal patterns.
Just 12. That's the whole alphabet.
That's the whole alphabet.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating is the dimensionality of these patterns.
How so?
Well, every single one of Cabot's 12 diagonals demands 3 simultaneous actions. You always have flexion or extension, coupled with adduction or abduction, and critically, this is the important part, internal or external rotation.
Oh, wow. So they don't happen one after the other.
No, they do not happen sequentially. They happen at the exact same millisecond. It's a concurrent 3-dimensional spatial phrase.
That's so cool. Let's actually map out a few of these so you listening can visualize this alphabet. The foundational diagonals are called D1 and D2, right?
Correct.
So take D1 flexion. The classic example in the source is bringing a glass of water to your mouth. So your arm bends, it crosses your midline, and the shoulder rotates inward. It's categorized as a pattern of internalization and protection.
Yeah, it's a very primal, self-soothing motion.
Yeah.
And then its antagonist is D1 extension.
Which would be what?
Imagine violently pushing something away from you. The arm extends out, it moves away from the midline, and it rotates internally. It is pure defense and propulsion.
Okay, I can picture that.
Yeah.
And then you have the D2 patterns, which they open up the body a bit differently.
Right.
Like D2 flexion is often described as drawing a sword from your opposite hip and reaching up high into the air. It's an exploration pattern.
Yep.
And D2 extension is just the reverse so pulling that raised arm down and across your body, which acts as this profound anchor for stabilization.
Yeah, and when you really look at these patterns and how the brain uses them, it feels remarkably like a computer macro.
A macro. Yes, I love that analogy. It fits perfectly.
It's actually a highly accurate way to conceptualize the neurology here.
Right, because instead of the brain acting like a frantic typist, manually hitting individual muscle keys like contract the bicep 10%, fire the pec minor 15%, it just hits one single macro button.
Exactly. The brain just clicks draw sword.
Right. And the central nervous system automatically executes this highly complex, pre-programmed spiral sequence.
And, that macro theory was proposed purely through clinical observation back in 1946.
Just by watching people move?
Just by watching. What's astonishing is that it took modern neuroscience and anatomy roughly 60 years to catch up and prove the exact mechanics of why Cabot was right.
Okay, wait, so if Cabot figured out these spirals just by looking at people in the 40s, how did modern science actually validate the software? Like, how did we prove it?
Well, it started in the late 80s and then really accelerated through the 2000s. You had researchers like Trush, Busy, and Davella. They proved that the central nervous system does indeed control modules, not individual muscles.
The macros.
Exactly. They demonstrated that just 3 to 4 of these spatiotemporal synergies are capable of generating virtually all human movements.
That is wild.
It is. But the real breakthrough regarding the spatial nature of this came from a researcher named Georgopoulos.
What did he find?
He discovered that the motor cortex doesn't actually encode muscle contractions at all. It encodes directions in space.
Okay, I want to pause on that for a second because that is a massive conceptual leap.
It really changes everything.
Right. The part of your brain that controls movement isn't thinking about muscle tension. It's basically acting like a spatial navigation engine calculating vectors.
Yes. The brain thinks in geometry. And those natural directional vectors encoded by the motor neurons perfectly match Cabot's diagonal proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, or PNF, patterns.
Wow.
So the biological software exactly matches the clinical geometry Cabot outlined.
Okay, so the software of the brain speaks in spirals. But what about the hardware? Because if the brain is sending a spiral signal, the physical tissue has to be capable of receiving and executing it.
Oh, for sure. And that brings us to the fascia.
Right.
Specifically the work of anatomists like Thomas Myers. So fascia is the connective tissue weaving through your entire body. For decades, traditional anatomy just treated it as, like, passive wrapping paper.
Right. Like its only job was to hold the important things, the muscles and organs in place.
Right.
Just biological packing peanuts.
Exactly. But Myers mapped out these continuous myofascial meridians. He proved the whole body is interconnected by these very specific tracks. And one of them, which is literally named the spiral line, wraps the human skeleton in a double helix.
A double helix. So it's physically analogous to a strand of DNA just wrapping around your musculature.
It is. And here is the critical data point that really connects the hardware to the software. Fascia contains roughly 10 times more mechanoreceptors than actual muscle tissue.
Wait, really? 10 times?
10 times more.
So this wrapping paper is actually an incredibly dense, highly active sensory motor network.
Exactly. It acts as a full-body proprioceptive antenna. But here is the catch. Because it's literally shaped as a double helix, it requires a twisting, spiraling motion to fully stimulate those receptors.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. When you move in an actual spiral, you wring out the fascia, which sends this massive, coherent data package back to the brain, telling it exactly where you are in space.
So if the fascia is the primary sensor, and it requires a spiral to activate, then all those rigid linear gym movements we do are essentially starving the brain of sensory data.
You're locking the body into a pattern that the nervous system barely registers.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's the danger of a purely mechanistic view of the body. A linear movement is neurologically quiet. A spiral movement is neurologically loud.
All right, so we have the spiral software mapping vectors and the double helix hardware acting as the sensor. But I really want to dig into the timing here, because the actual mechanics of how this system boots up in real time is kind of counterintuitive.
It is, yeah. It relies entirely on predictive control.
Oh, yeah.
The central nervous system uses an internal model of your body to predict the physical consequences of a movement before you even make it.
Wow.
It calculates the necessary balance corrections ahead of time. If you map the microsecond timeline, movement actually begins long before you see it.
Okay, let's break that timeline down. Walk us through it.
Sure. So at negative 100 milliseconds, which is 1/10 of a second before any visible motion occurs, we see what are called anticipatory postural adjustments, or APAs.
Right.
Your postural muscles automatically fire.
So it's basically bracing for the physical impact of its own generated momentum.
Right. Exactly. Then, at negative 50 milliseconds, researchers Hodges and Richardson proved that the transverse abdominal activates.
Which is the core.
Yes. This muscle acts as the central hub. It fires first, absolutely unconditionally, regardless of which direction your arms or legs are preparing to move.
Okay, then we hit 0 milliseconds, where the visible limb movement finally begins. And then by plus 50 milliseconds, the spiral is actively propagating outward,
And it strictly follows a proximal to distal sequence.
meaning it must travel from the center of the body outward to the extremities.
Yes, every single time.
Okay, let me challenge that sequence for a second, though, because the idea that the core must fire at negative 50 milliseconds makes total sense for a planned movement, like reaching for a glass of water. But what about rapid reaction scenarios?
Like what?
Think of a tennis player returning a 120-mile-per-hour serve. They have a fraction of a second to react. They don't have time to consciously ground their core and trigger a sequential macro, do they?
Ugh.
Does this predictive sequence break down under extreme pressure?
It's a really great question, but actually, no, the sequence doesn't break down at all. In fact, it's exactly why elite athletes can return that serve in the first place.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The anticipatory postural adjustments are subcortical. They don't require conscious thought. They are deeply embedded in that macro we talked about. The brain's predictive model is just running constantly.
Oh, I see.
Even in a rapid reaction, if the trunk does not anchor first, the limbs simply cannot generate the required force, and the player will either miss or injure their shoulder. The sequence is biological law.
It's like dropping a stone into a still pond. The ripples mathematically have to start at the center where the stone hit and then propagate outward to the edges.
That's a perfect way to put it.
If a wave mysteriously started at the edge of the pond without the center moving first, it would violate the laws of physics. So if your arm tries to move before your trunk anchors it, you violate your own biomechanics.
Exactly. And this strict internal sequence doesn't just govern how we generate movement. It actually dictates how we perceive movement in others.
Okay, how so?
This invisible geometry literally defines our baseline concept of grace, beauty, and athleticism.
Oh, that's fascinating. So to illustrate that, the source looks at two completely different physical archetypes of the spiral, right? The ballet arabesque and the golf swing.
Yes.
Mechanically, how do they utilize this native code?
Well, let's take the ballet arabesque first. A dancer balances on one leg, extending the other high behind them. Culturally, we tend to view it as delicate, but neurobiomechanically, it is the ultimate expression of structural power.
Really? Power.
Yes, it utilizes a posture dynamic cross. The supporting leg anchors deep into that D1 extension pattern we discussed, which is pure stabilization, and then the free leg is in D2 flexion.
So they are maximizing dynamic stability by crossing the diagonals, which simultaneously floods the brain with optimal proprioceptive feedback from the fascia.
Exactly. They are wringing out the sensors, and you see the exact same underlying software in a golf swing.
The golf swing is a spiral, too.
A perfect swing is essentially a flawless motor phrase. It begins by grounding the fascia in the foot. Then you see profound dissociation between the pelvis and the thorax. They rotate at different speeds to store up elastic kinetic energy.
Right, and then you get the diagonal transmission of that energy. It flows from the back leg, through the trunk, into the opposite shoulder, down the arm, and finally into the club head.
But the most vital part of the golf swing is actually the end. It's the spiral deceleration.
Ah, the follow-through.
Right. It's a rapid inversion of the spiral designed specifically to protect the joints from all that accumulated force. Expert golfers don't necessarily generate more raw muscular power. They just have vastly superior spiral organization.
Which allows for perfect energy transfer without blowing out their joints.
Exactly.
This brings up a really profound philosophical question, I think.
Yeah.
Why do we watch a perfect ballet pose or a flawless golf swing and instinctively label it as beautiful?
To answer that, we have to look at the discovery of mirror neurons by Rizzolatti.
Mirror neurons.
Yeah. Mirror neurons are specialized cells in the brain that activate both when you perform an action yourself and when you simply observe someone else performing that action.
So you were internally simulating the physics of what you were watching.
Yes. When we observe a dancer moving in a natural fluid diagonal spiral, our internal mirror neuron network fires very smoothly because it recognizes the geometry.
Oh, wow.
What we call grace or harmony is not an arbitrary cultural abstraction. It is a literal neurological resonance. Your brain is watching the dancer and basically saying, yes, that is the exact macro I would use.
That is incredible. Beauty is literally just neurological recognition.
Yeah.
And I guess that explains why watching someone perform a rigid, segmented, purely frontal movement feels so uncomfortable. It creates massive dissonance in our mirror system because it doesn't match our native code. We instantly perceive it as clumsy.
which perfectly bridges the gap to Dr. Christophe Delong's work and the modern clinical understanding of all this.
Yeah.
Dr. Delong and others integrating this space have recognized that preserving this harmony isn't just about aesthetics. It's about deep neurological health and injury prevention.
Absolutely.
And because we now possess this complete understanding of the biological software, we are in the middle of a massive technological paradigm shift. We are finally able to teach artificial intelligence to see and evaluate movement the same way our mirror neurons do.
And this is the shift from what we can call the old ontology to the new spiral ontology. Because for years, biomechanical AI was just trained to evaluate movement by simply measuring isolated joint angles, right?
Right. Like, is the elbow at 90 degrees? Is the hip at 45 degrees?
Which is exactly the gym diagram approach we talked about at the start.
Exactly. And it fails for the exact same reasons. Measuring isolated hinge angles completely loses the global structure. It cannot capture energy transfer, and it definitely cannot measure the quality of the movement.
So the new spiral ontology just throws out the isolated hinges altogether, and platforms like Kinexa are really pioneering this.
They are.
Instead of a sequence of angles, Kinexa reads movement as a continuous spatio-temporal phrase built on these diagonal spirals. And to process this, the AI doesn't just look for an elbow bending. It utilizes a pipeline built on structural rules.
Yeah, and rather than just reading off a list of these rules, let's actually look at how an AI like Kinexa builds a spatial map of a human.
Okay, let's go.
First, it actively searches for diagonal coupling. It needs to see a mathematical relationship between opposite segments of the body. Like if you step forward with your left foot, it expects the right shoulder to counter-rotate.
So it's measuring simultaneous rotation and translation. It's not just tracking if your center of mass moves forward. It's tracking how the body twists around its axis while moving forward.
Exactly. And it heavily enforces intersegmental continuity.
Meaning what?
The AI knows that if one part of the fascial line is in a spiral, the adjacent segments must share a coherent axis. You physically cannot have a spiraling shoulder attached to a rigid, locked-out elbow without causing a severe energy leak. Kinexa maps that continuity.
And it checks for trunk supremacy, too. We talked about the timeline earlier, the core firing at negative 50 milliseconds. Kinexa is specifically programmed to ensure the trunk activates before, or at least simultaneously with, the distal limb movement.
Right. If an athlete's hand begins to move before their core stabilizes, the AI instantly flags it as a structural error.
It even analyzes minimal axial rotation, right? The AI understands that even a really simple arm movement, like reaching out to open a door, biologically requires a fractional degree of thoracic rotation.
Yes. If the chest remains completely flat and rigid during a reach, the AI identifies it as pathological.
The real-world applications for a system like Kinexa are just staggering when you really consider it. Take augmented sports coaching, for example.
Oh, it's huge.
You have this AI analyzing a video feed of a pitcher or a runner in real time. It's overlaying these visual spirals on the screen, instantly spotting where the energy transfer breaks down, and correcting the athlete's intersegmental continuity before an injury even occurs.
And the clinical applications are just as profound, especially in things like post-stroke telerehabilitation.
How does it work there?
Well, after a stroke, patients frequently develop abnormal, highly rigid movement patterns as their brain struggles to bypass the damaged neural pathways.
So the brain is desperately trying to execute a movement, but it can't access the spiral macro anymore, so it just defaults to a clunky robotic hinge movement.
Exactly. Now, imagine a patient performing rehab exercises at home. A standard camera using the old AI would just track if the patient successfully lifted their arm to shoulder height. It would log it as a success.
Even if the movement was terrible.
Right. But an AI using the new spiral ontology watches how the arm is lifted. If the patient substitutes a natural PNF spiral with a rigid pathological heave, the AI immediately alerts the physical therapist. It objectively measures the quality of the neurological recovery.
That is so powerful. And we're seeing this scale into industrial ergonomics as well. Companies can monitor assembly lines with these spatial cameras. They aren't tracking productivity. They're tracking the degradation of the spiral.
Yeah, catching fatigue before it becomes an injury.
Exactly. The moment a worker's movements shift from fluid diagonals to linear, rigid repetition due to fatigue, the AI predicts a repetitive strain injury before the tissue actually tears.
It completely shifts our entire medical focus. We are no longer waiting around to treat the localized injury. We are actively monitoring and preserving the harmony of the entire system.
It fundamentally changes how we view ourselves, really. I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is recognizing that you listening are not a collection of isolated parts. You are an incredibly complex, brilliantly engineered symphony of diagonals.
Beautifully said.
The movement of your body is a spatial language crafted over millions of years.
And like any language, if you don't speak it fluently and frequently, you begin to lose it.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today, circling back to mirror neurons. If our brains fundamentally crave the execution and observation of these 3D spirals to maintain optimal health, consider what modern life is doing to our neurology.
It's a sobering reality to evaluate, honestly.
It really is. We spend the vast majority of our waking hours staring at flat, two-dimensional screens. We navigate our world by scrolling with isolated, perfectly linear finger movements. We sit locked into rigid, squared-off postures at our desks, in our cars, and on our couches.
We are systematically stripping the spirals out of our daily physical vocabulary.
Exactly. So are we slowly untraining our own mirror neurons? By depriving our fascia of that double helix twist, are we starving our brains of the proprioceptive data they need to keep us balanced and pain-free?
We very well might be.
We might literally be forgetting the native language of our own bodies simply through the daily habits of modern convenience.
Yes.
It is definitely something to chew on. So the next time you stand up from your desk to stretch,
Really,
see what happens if you add a little twist.
let the hardware ring out the signal.
Just hit the macro.